Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. Gene Joke here, and today I'm essentially reacting to the announcement of the Rare Collection 1 for the Evercade. So for anyone who doesn't know, Rare are a UK based games developer that started out under the name Ultimate Play the Game, releasing games primarily for the ZX Spectrum but also for the other home micros at the time. They were known for producing games of, I suppose, almost arcade quality given the hardware, and providing some really good gameplay for their games. Although they soon left the home micros behind and moved on to developing games for the Nintendo Entertainment System, which is where they changed their name to Rare, and I think where many people are most familiar with their games. I don't think anyone who knows the name Rare doesn't know that they're responsible for games like Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and the Banjo-Kazooie games. Of course, it's been quite a long time since they've done anything with Nintendo, since they got bought out by Microsoft, but I'll come back to the whole Microsoft Xbox thing later. What's interesting about this collection is it mixes home micro games, console games and arcade games. In the live stream following the announcement by Blunners of Total Video Gamers, Sean from Blaze came into chat and mentioned that the cart will have a reversible sleeve, one side for red cart and one side for blue. When I asked about what about the purple, as there's an arcade game on the collection, he says, well, red and blue make purple. But anyway, this cart also marks the first ZX Spectrum games that will come to the Evercade. Something many people have been asking for, or at least many British people anyway. I'm sure many people think, oh my god, those look like ass, they look terrible, I'm not interested in those. To those people I say, Atari 2600, Intellivision, and oi, shut it! No, seriously though, the ZX Spectrum was an underpowered machine, and it didn't become popular because of its technical prowess, but because it was cheap, easily available, with a vast library of games. And there is a distinct charm to the high contrast limited palette, but maybe that's my nostalgia talking. I think Blaze have been quite clever about this collection, in that they've mixed the ZX Spectrum games, and a C64 game by the looks of it, along with the Nintendo Entertainment System games and an arcade game, and a Game Boy Color game I think it is. I think this collection has enough diversity of systems and gameplay types to have pretty good broad appeal, so even those who dislike the blue carts or find older games are too much for them to go back to, they can't get over the clunkiness of them or the primitive graphics, they'll have something that will quite likely appeal to them as well. So anyway, let's do a breakdown of the games. There's Jetpack for the ZX Spectrum, a single screen, I suppose, shoot 'em up, collect 'em up, where you control a man with a jetpack who has to reconstruct his rocket, which is broken into 3 parts. You use your jetpack, zoom along the screen, shooting the enemies, picking up parts of the rocket, dropping them in place to rebuild it, and then you have to get the fuel cells that come up and replace those, rinse and repeat. It's simple arcade action, but it's a lot of fun. It was the very first ZX Spectrum game I played, and it's definitely left an impression on me. I do have a lot of nostalgia for this game, but it still holds up pretty well. Next we have Lunar Jetman, which naturally is the sequel. It expands upon Jetpack, giving a scrolling area to work through while you refuel your lunar buggy, or lunar rover. Now I never played this one back in the day, I could never find a copy of it, but it's a game that I wanted. I have played it briefly on Rare Replay and I quite enjoyed it there, but I haven't given it much time, so it'd be good to give it a proper playthrough on the Evercade. Attic Attack is a top-down action adventure where you have to search through a haunted castle, finding parts of a key. Oh, and once again it's a ZX Spectrum game, as was Lunar Jetman. It's another game I didn't play much of back in the day, but it's always been well regarded. Saber War is another maze-like game, although this time set in the jungle, where you explore a huge map and fight off jungle creatures. It's also the first appearance of Saberman, an early mascot for Rare, or rather Ultimate Play the Game as they were known back then. Once again, this appears to be a ZX Spectrum game, can't really miss that distinctive colour palette. Next up is Underworld, the sequel to Saber Wolf. This time it's a side-scrolling platform game. Curiously, it looks like this is the C64 version, although it's much more famous for being a ZX Spectrum game. I've no idea how the versions compare, so yeah, whatever. And Saberman returns once again in the third game in the series, Knight's Law. In Knight's Law you have to save Saberman from the deadly lycanthrope curse. Now I don't know if this was the first isometric flick screen action adventure game that came out. It's one of the earliest I know of and definitely influenced a lot of other games on the Spectrum. And yes, this very much does appear to be the Spectrum version on the collection. Next up is Gunfight, another isometric action adventure, this time with a Wild West theme. Once again, it's a Spectrum game. I've never played this one, so I don't know that much about it, but it'll be interesting to give it a try. After that, we move on to the NES games, starting with RC Pro-Am, an isometric racing game where you race your truck car things. I know this game has fans, but I've barely ever played it, so I can't really comment on the gameplay. Next up is Cobra Triangle, so essentially think RC Pro-Am, but you're racing powerboats. I've played it, it seemed quite fun, but I haven't played much of it, so I can't really say much beyond that. But it's one of those games I had heard about back in the day, and I'd assume it's quite well known, but is it any good? And next up is Battletoads, which is a beat 'em up where you control big toads with their even bigger fists. You really wouldn't want to get fisted by these guys. Now, I've never played the NES original of Battletoads, well, I assume it's the original one anyway, but I did play I think it's on the Mega Drive, there was a port, or I played some port of it somewhere, and I really didn't think much of it, mostly because of that sort of jet bike stage, or whatever you call it. The turbo tunnel, that was it. But that was a port, and who knows how it compared to the original. But Battletoads does have its fans for sure, so I think this will please quite a few people. And next up we have Battletoads Arcade. I mean, it's Battletoads and it's an arcade version. I don't know if this is supposed to be any good or not, but I'm sure it'll go down well, and it'll be fun finding out if it is indeed any good. And finally there's Conker's Pocket Tales, which I assume is a Game Boy Color game and essentially a prequel to Conker's Bad Fur Day. I'd never even heard of this game before, to be perfectly honest, but it appears to be a top-down action game, so yeah, could be cool. I guess we'll find out in a couple of months. So what do I think? Well, it's 12 games, so it's got a good range or a good variety of games. I think it's got some interesting aspects to it. Completely makes a mockery of the whole numbering system of the Evercade, but I think the cart will benefit from that. And you could argue that as most of these games are included on the Rare Replay, even the Spectrum games or the C64 games or whatever they are could be considered console games because they're on Rare Replay on the Xbox. Bit of a stretch, but whatever. I mean, it's not like they haven't already crossed the streams between red and purple carts before, or red and blue carts. This is essentially Evercade just reaching its final evolution with mixing all three into one. Personally, I'm much more interested in the Spectrum games than the others, as generally I haven't been a huge fan of many of Rare's games. And I am glad to see Spectrum come to Evercade, although I know not everyone will share my nostalgia for it. I thought it was quite amusing how in the trailer they show you the ZX Spectrum's Tribute Clash or Colour Clash at work, where it shows Lunar Jetman. It's also a very varied cartridge in game genres, so I think it will have a pretty broad appeal. Earlier, before the trailer was released, I had stumbled across some leaks that were on social media, and initially I wasn't that excited. I mean, I didn't look close into it, I don't know how much information was leaked. I just heard the name Rare had been leaked somewhere, and I avoided it waiting for the trailer. And the reason I wasn't that excited is, well, as I mentioned, I wasn't a huge Rare fan, at least of their later output, and in my opinion the best games they've developed were the ones for the ZX Spectrum. Sorry Banjo-Kazooie fans or GoldenEye fans, those games just never did it for me. But seeing the trailer and looking at the lineup of games, I am more interested. There's a mix of nostalgia and discovery. I have played Rare Replay a little bit, but I tend to find I play retro games more thoroughly when I play them on the Evercade. I know it's a weird distinction, but that's the way it is. And ultimately, really, if I'm not a fan of games, I will always give them a good try on the Evercade, and maybe to see if there's something I've missed about them. So combining that with the games I have nostalgia for, yeah, I'm here for it. Now, previously Blaze have mentioned that all of the three collections to be announced are number ones in a series and could potentially lead to collections 2 and 3 and so forth. And I can definitely see there's room for further Rare collections. Naturally, certain Rare games have got zero chance of ever coming to the Evercade. GoldenEye, Donkey Kong Country, things like that. But anything not owned by Nintendo or tied to some other license would be distinctly possible. And there are other games on Rare Replay which would run on the Evercade. The N64 games naturally would take, I suppose, a little bit of reworking like Glover had to get them running on the Evercade smoothly, but I don't see why that couldn't happen. But I also think it's safe to say that anything developed for the Xbox and beyond is not going to be on a future Evercade collection, because there's pretty much no way they're going to run on the Evercade hardware. But many of those are considered among Rare's weakest games anyway, so I don't think it's going to be considered to be much of a loss. But Rare games aside, what are the other implications of this license? Well, as Rare are owned by Microsoft, it potentially opens the door to other games owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft own Bethesda, who in turn own id Software. Doom collection incoming? It's gotta happen, surely. Of course, Doom is on just about everything, even your fridge can play it, but Doom isn't the only game that it have. I mean, obviously there are games like Quake and Wolfenstein 3D, but there's also Commander Keen, which I don't know, might have some kind of dual licensing thing going on with Apogee, I'm not sure, but potentially that could happen. And they have handed a whole bunch of DOS games which I'm not really familiar with. And personally, I can't think of things like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D without thinking of things like Heretic and Hexen. Now, I've no idea who owns those, or if this would potentially open the door for those coming to the Evercade as well, but it could be interesting if it did. And I mentioned Bethesda. And you think Bethesda, you think Elder Scrolls or Fallout or even Starfield, but they were kicking around for a long time before they were hit it big with the Elder Scrolls. They published a whole bunch of games for MS-DOS, Amiga, Atari ST, even games for the NES that you wouldn't really associate with the company, and I've no idea if any of these are possible due to rights issues. Wayne Gretzky hockey? Yeah, probably not. Terminator games? Also unlikely. But from their back catalogue, there could be a game or two they potentially could bring to the Evercade. While looking through, one that caught my eye was the Elder Scrolls Travels Shadow Key, an RPG developed for the Nokia N-Gage. I know nothing about the game, but being that it's for the N-Gage, I'd imagine that the Evercade could emulate N-Gage games, so yeah, it could be quite a unique and unexpected game for the Evercade if it were to happen. Moving on to other companies owned by Microsoft, there's Activision Blizzard, which opens up lots of possibilities. I know many people would say about the Activision 2600 games, but for me what would be really interesting would be the games from the Blizzard Arcade collection as found on other systems, such as the Lost Vikings, Blackthorn, Rock'n'Roll Racing, and so on. But they could also bring across games like Diablo and Warcraft, as both series had entries on the PlayStation. Also, coming back to an earlier point I mentioned about Hexen and Heretic, and Raven Software, who developed those, are also owned by Microsoft. Ultimately, Microsoft have been buying up loads of studios over the last couple of decades, in some cases shutting them down, but in turn many of these studios rose from the ashes of other companies, and rights to certain older games may still reside with them. So the chances are there's potentially loads of games owned by Microsoft that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you hear the company's names. So if this deal with Rare does indicate there's potential for more publishers and games owned by Microsoft, we could see some very interesting things coming up. But I think that's enough idle speculation. I think it's safe to say the Rare collection does look quite interesting, and I imagine it's going to please most people fairly well. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.